Good evening and a warm welcome to all. I am Mridul on behalf of Care Ratings. Welcome you to our today's webinar on real estate and sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. Please be informed we'll be having a Q&A session no sooner the panel discussion ends. In case of any queries, you're please requested to key in your questions. Now may I request Mr. Milind Gadkari, who's a Senior Director at Care Ratings based out of our Mumbai office, to take over the proceedings, please.
Thanks, Mridul, for the introduction. I welcome you all to Care Ratings webinar on the Indian real estate industry, the real story. Before we begin the presentation, let me introduce our guest, Mr. Rohit Gera, Managing Director of Gera Developments Private Limited. Mr. Gera has over 2 decades of experience in real estate development. He has a double major in building construction, project management and economics from the University of Massachusetts and advanced management degree in real estate from Graduate School of Design at Harvard University. He is currently the Vice President of CREDAI Pune Metro. Moving on to the presentation, real estate, the real story. In the past decade, the sector has witnessed a lot from being a significant contributor of GDP to facing turbulent times. The government has been backing the sector with several initiatives like Housing for All by 2022, push to develop smart cities, introducing tax benefits, etc. However, despite all such initiatives, the sector has faced some tough times recently. Macroeconomic indicators such as decline in GDP growth, rising NPAs of banks, tighter liquidity position of NBFCs, curtailed funding from private equity players, and on top of it, recent outbreak of COVID-19 impacting the sector and many of its players. As contagion hit the economy, the residential segment of sector witnessed worst impact, while in leasing segment, retail spaces have been most impacted with prolonged closure of malls. A lot more can also be attributed to overall macroeconomic growth, as GDP growth, which was already the slowest at 4.2% in FY20, has further been impacted due to the outbreak. The IMF has projected the Indian economy to contract by 10.3% in FY21 and rebound to positive 8.8% in 22. From ratings perspective, during last 7 months, Care has witnessed 18% of the real estate entities being downgraded, while the modified credit ratio for the sector has fallen to 0.86 times for Q2 FY21 as compared to 0.91 times for Q2 FY20. We also foresee some clients opting one-time restructuring as per RBI directives. However, as the economy is unlocked, the sector has witnessed a surge in demand for residential spaces coinciding with festival season and reduction of stamp duty in Maharashtra. The sustained improvement needs to be monitored going forward, and the path to recovery seems moderately stretched. In our today's presentation, we have broadly covered the state of sector prior to the outbreak, touching the real issues faced by the industry. This will be briefly followed by impact of COVID-19 on the sector and mounting liquidity challenges due to the same, as well as the measures announced by the government. The presentation will then move to show Care's rating dispersion and movements in ratings of real estate players in the past 5 years and especially during the last 7 months. The presentation will ultimately be concluded with overall rating concerns and outlook on the sector. I will now hand over to Monica to take us through the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. As already mentioned, please, the next slide, please. Yes. As already mentioned, India's real estate sector has been through a lot of turbulence. The surfeit of regulations, changes, and unprecedented events. The slide represents a brief walkthrough of the sector and its cyclicality over past 15 years. This is a database of projects launched, completed, and stalled over the period. With the graphical presentation, we can link with the happenings in the macro level and see how the performance of the sector got impacted. During 2004 to 2007, substantial amount of investment started happening in the sector, and high number of projects were launched in such period until the global financial crisis of 2008 hit the sector, which led to sudden increase in stalled projects. Post 2010, economy gained momentum and industry witnessed more launches and completed projects during the period. While 2013 to 2016 was the period of consolidation, wherein smaller players with tighter liquidity appeared. The phase of 2016 to 2020 witnessed lot of regulatory developments in the form of enactment of quota, demonetization, and introduction of GST, which kept the industry under constant turmoil. On the top of it, the industry was also hit by NBFC's liquidity crisis, which resulted into cautious lending from NBFCs and banks. The outbreak of COVID-19 and resultant imposition of lockdowns is the latest addition to the pain of this cash-starved industry. The sector has though revived to some extent post-unlocking, with uncertainty revolving around the contagion being gradually fading away. However, the same is yet to be monitored, and performance of the sector in the second half of financial year 2020 remains crucial, with the new normal, which has made everyone cautious about their lifestyle choices and festive season around the corner. Next slide, please. In this part, we are going to see how the different segments of the real estate industry were moving before the pandemic hit the economy and the industry altogether. In the shown slide, first part represents residential segment, which has shown some signs of stability, as developers have been reconciling to the new normal since the implementation of the RERA and GST, and increasing supply gradually with reduced ticket sizes and also the unit sizes, largely driven by focus on affordable housing and government incentives under the Housing for All by 2022 program. The second part represents leasing segment of commercial office spaces, which was performing best among all the segments. Office space supply had lagged earlier, as developers chose to commit a majority of investments into residential real estate. The ensuing supply crunch caused vacancy levels to plummet and rental levels to rise across cities, as occupiers were left with increasingly fewer choices in subsequent years. This slide in office space development was arrested in early calendar year 2018 and gained momentum, with commercial office spaces seeing robust demand and touching historic high in calendar year 2019, showing a 27% growth on year-on-year basis. New construction for commercial office space saw a growth of 56% on year-on-year basis. Co-working segment contributed around 15% of the overall absorption of office space last year. Post-COVID, the demand for flexible workspace could rise as corporates would look to avoid capital expenditure on setting up their own offices. Next slide, please. Under leasing warehousing spaces, the warehousing segment, which is coming up in India recently, shows a promise for future after commercial office spaces. As technology permeates the sector, demand for quality space is increasing, and corporates across segments are opting for large modern warehouses. Demand side, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore accounted for more than 60% of leasing activity. On supply side, about 42 million square feet space was added in 2019, led by Mumbai, Chennai, and Ahmedabad. Organized warehousing developers are steadily seeing more demand from occupier groups and sectors like e-commerce, retail, manufacturing, etc. The string of policy and regulatory reforms unveiled by India in the recent times, such as implementation of GST, Make in India, accelerated the entry of international institutional players in Indian warehousing and logistic parks. Under leasing retail spaces, notwithstanding the decline in deal activity in the second half of 2018, following the NBFC-induced liquidity crisis, the retail segment attracted investments of almost $115 million in just the first quarter of 2019. Retail malls came into existence in India in the late 90s and expanded aggressively in the past 2 decades. Currently, there is 50 million square feet of leasable mall stock across the top 7 cities. Besides metros and tier 1 cities, malls are also expanding aggressively across the top tier 2 and tier 3 cities. However, growing threat from e-commerce industry has been one of the prime reasons for decline in leasing of retail spaces. Further occurrence of pandemic has significantly impacted the segment, and investment activity in the sector has collapsed considerably. Next slide. In the given slide, we can see how the various segments of the sector have been impacted from COVID-19. The warehouse segment has been least impacted amongst all, as demand has increased for essentials. It was marginally impacted due to closure of manufacturing units, resulting into deferral of rents. However, rent deferrals, structured waivers offered to tenants instead of a reduction to a large extent resulted into minimal impact on the sector. Since 2017, the warehousing industry has secured second highest share in equity investments after office and much higher than retail. 77% of the investments in warehousing assets went into new developments, whereas 11% went into ready assets and 12% into a combination of ready and under construction assets. Under office segment, the measures adopted by the government to curb the spread of the pandemic has already led to companies widely adopting work from home policy, and then social distancing is here to stay. Thus, density in offices is likely to decrease. In the prevailing business uncertainty, the tenants might resist any hike in rentals and look to renegotiate existing or expiring leases. Further new launches and occupancy will be monitored. The lockdown has created a lot of pressure on retail space, especially in shopping malls where footfalls have fallen drastically. Moreover, there is limited chance for improvement in the immediate future. The lease rental discounting loans currently availed by the players in the commercial segment provide stable revenue stream, as minimum rent is guaranteed with fixed monthly repayment schedules. However, post the pandemic, the equations have changed, with risk of loss of rentals necessitating reviewing the force majeure clauses, as many tenants in India have invoked the force majeure clause in their rental agreement. Moreover, the tenants are now demanding a complete switch to revenue share agreements instead of minimum rent plus revenue share. Such a modification in the revenue model of the commercial segment will be a credit risk monitorable, as the comfort of assured cash flow gets compromised. Residential demand was substantially impacted in the key Indian cities, with people postponing their buying decisions owing to mounting fear of job losses and pay cuts, while developers have refrained from launching new projects. Next slide. Let us now look at the measures which were announced by the Government of India and Reserve Bank of India post-lockdown. The government has announced slew of measures to combat the economic distress caused due to outbreak of COVID-19. In this regard, a sizable economic stimulus package of about rupees 20 trillion was announced for the recovery of the economy. However, no major incentive was announced to directly boost the real estate sector. There were a couple of indirect measures announced in the package which attempted to bring the sector on track, such as liquidity push to NBFCs and HFCs, and similarly support to MSMEs has been extended. The same has resulted into infusion of liquidity to some extent. However, the aversion among lenders in most cases continued to prevail. The other incentives, such as extension of credit-linked subsidy scheme for another year, has helped in sustaining demand for affordable housing to a certain extent. Extension of moratorium and RERA timelines has brought some respite as well for the developers. Recently, a major relief in the form of stamp duty reduction was announced by Maharashtra government, which has been creating good demand in the region. Next slide. In the earlier slide, we had seen the key statistics and trends in various segments of real estate before the pandemic struck. This slide shows the post-pandemic picture. Under residential segment, as was expected, new launches has witnessed high degrowth of 46%, mainly due to no major new launches hitting the market post-lockdown and occurrence of pandemic. The same trend has been followed by sales in the sector with degrowth of 54% in the first half of calendar year 2020 vis-a-vis calendar year 2019. Under office leasing, the new additions or completions have come to a halt after the outbreak. Hence, during the first half of 2020, the industry witnessed addition of only 17.30 million square feet, that too mainly launched prior to pandemic, thereby registering overall degrowth of 27% in new constructions. The office leasing activity has surprisingly witnessed growth of 7%, mainly pertaining to deals closed prior to the pandemic. The total stock of the office spaces continues to remain on moving trajectory. Next slide. This slide represents the data pertaining to launches, sales, unsold inventory and prices for the second half of 2020 vis-a-vis the first half. As evident from the data, the unprecedented disruptions in the economy caused by the pandemic and complete halt of economic activities owing to imposed lockdown has ensured a steep decline in sales during the first half of 2020. Further, in most of the cities, more than 90% of the transactions had happened during the first quarter of the calendar year 2020, while the second quarter witnessed negligible amount of sales. Innovative marketing strategies such as virtual site visits, presentations of residential projects, as well as strategies to provide funding support or waiver of initial milestone link collections from developers to buyers has salvaged certain sales for top developers in the second quarter of calendar year 2020. The other major chunk of sales in the said quarter was derived from old inquiry conversions rather than the new sales. Almost all the 8 cities under coverage witnessed steep decline in sales and launches. However, NCR recorded the worst hit with year-on-year decline of about 73% and 82% in sales and launches respectively during the first half of 2020. The Kolkata market witnessed growth of 37% in launches. However, the growth is on an abnormally low base. Sales in end-user markets like Pune, Bangalore and Hyderabad also fell sharply by around 42%, 57% and 43% year-on-year, respectively, during the first half of 2020. This can be attributed to income disruptions and impacted financial profile of home buyers, especially in the affordable segment. Weighted average prices have also fallen across most cities in the first half of 2020, with NCR, Pune and Chennai seeing the most correction at 5.8%, 5.4% and 5.5% respectively, year-on-year by the end of first half of 2020. The markets of Hyderabad and Bangalore have been comparatively insulated from the economic slowdown because of sustained demand from the IT sector. Next slide. The current slide will cover the impact on the office spaces of Tier 1 cities. Despite the emergence of concept of work from home and work near home, the occupiers, especially with strong financial profile, are scripting a different story. While the second quarter of calendar year 2020 was completely suffocated by an unprecedented pandemic-induced lockdown, the third quarter resulted into heightened activity in leasing spaces. The resilient presence of IT sector in the markets of Bangalore and Hyderabad has contributed nearly 80% of net absorption in the third quarter of 2020. While the intensity of pandemic gradually declining and impact of the same on the segment is yet to be monitored, the resurgence in the demand of office spaces in the third quarter has already been encouraging for the sector and indicates the commercial segment is fast recovering as the economy opened up. Next slide. Now this slide shows that while the sector was already battling with various liquidity challenges, investors holding high expectations for return of capital, requirement of high asset covers, and flow of funds in accordance with RERA, The occurrence of COVID-19 has created altogether new set of liquidity challenges, and the cash flows of real estate developers in post-pandemic era are being impacted like never before. Based on our understanding and discussions with various developers, the major challenges that have been contributed to liquidity stress, particularly during the lockdown phase, included the regulatory approvals and construction were slowed down considerably, and this had curtailed the further milestone-based funding for the real estate developers. The stressed cash flow position of developer is also attributable to the fact that most of the banks did not have room to allow developers to collect the first loan disbursement or even subsequent disbursements in some cases. Despite huge liquidity push of more than 30,000 crore to NBFCs and HFCs, there has been no compulsion of lending to real estate sector. And thus the lending support from banks or shadow banks has remained lower. MSME funding to real estate sector was also quite restricted. Next slide. Now in the given slide, we are going to see the investment activity in the past decade in the entire segment of real estate. From the graphs on the slide, we can see investment activity in the residential space has been declining year on year. There has been enormous flow of money from PE investors in the year 2015 to 2017, with regular flow of more than 2,500 million US dollars. However, post demonetization, the investments are reduced to the segment. Contrary to residential segment, office spaces have witnessed increasing flow of capital from PE investors. And 2018 was the year when the segment had touched around $4,000 million of investment. Though the investment in 2019 dipped by around 25%, yet the investments were near to 3,000 million US dollars. However, post the pandemic, the flow of money from PE investors needs to be seen with work from home emerging as a greater threat to the segment. Private investments in retail spaces has emerged lately post 2015. And the segment has witnessed good amount of investments from 2016 to 2019, despite emergence of e-commerce industry. Warehouses have been sweet spot for PE investors over the years, as can be seen from the graph. Till 2016, this sector was unseen by the investors. But in calendar year 2017 and 18, warehouse segment saw increased investment in the sector. In the calendar year 2019, investments declined a little to around $1,900 million. Due to COVID impact, PE investment in the entire real estate sector steeply declined for calendar year 2020 from calendar year 2019. Thank you. I will now hand over to Mr. Devesh Shah, who is the real estate sector specialist at CARE Ratings.
Devesh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Monica, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be talking about REIT and the salient features of REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. A REIT structure involves unit holders to invest in the units which will eventually be utilized by trust along with debt, if any, in acquiring the controlling interest in assets directly or through SPVs or through two-level SPV structure with holding company taking care of the ultimate SPVs. The salient features on SEBI guidelines of REIT mainly include stipulations on sponsor holding, distributions and investments by trust and leverage. Talking about sponsor holding, sponsors are mandatorily required to hold 25% of total units of REIT for the first 3 years from listing. On distribution, trust has to essentially distribute 90% of distributable cash flows once in every 6 months. And if the cash flows are routed through intermediate holding company under two-level SPV structure, the holding company will distribute 100% cash flows of SPV and 90% of its own. The sales proceeds from any property, if sold, is also required to be distributed to the extent of 90% unless utilized for investment in another property. Moving on to investments, a REIT has to essentially invest in 80% of its value in completed assets, and investment should not be done at least in 2 properties, wherein investment in 1 property should not exceed 60%. Coming on to leverage, a REIT is authorized to avail funding through debt, provided such funding is limited to the tune of 49% of the value of the REIT. All these features of REIT make it more transparent, and the stringent structure provides an additional cushion in the assessment of credit profile of REITs. The main objective of the REIT thus is to cut through the maze and present a more transparent picture given the various challenges in the real estate sector. Next slide, please. In this slide, we will discuss about the performance of REITs in the domestic markets. India has recently witnessed listing of two REITs in the form of Embassy Office Park and Mindspace Business Park, recently listed. Both the REIT have gained adequate popularity and were listed at premium than the respective IPO prices. This would ultimately change the outlook of leasing spaces. We also believe the recent amendment in taxation has changed the equation for REIT. The tax incidence has shifted from company to unit holders for dividend distribution. An exemption of such dividend distribution tax helped the government addressing the issue of double taxation for investors. Indian market, still being in the nascent stage of REIT maturity, remains an unexplored concept and is lot to witness in future. The above two listings and positive regulatory developments would encourage more and more players to enter the REIT markets. While from the credit perspective, pooling of high quality and grade A assets, stringent guidelines, high level of transparency, involvement of top tier developers contribute a lot in the credit assessment of the trust and its SPVs. And as can be seen in the charts, the market price of both the REITs are fairly stable, except during the period of lockdown for one of the listed REITs. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the recovery timeline and the impactometer for the various segments of the real estate. The first one being warehousing. With e-commerce companies capitalizing on the pent-up demand and focus on essential categories, warehousing is expected to witness a relatively quicker recovery in comparison to other real estate segment. Commercial, stable rentals and low vacancy levels, the severity of impact in the commercial office segment in India continues to remain moderate. And cities like Bangalore and Hyderabad already witnessing signs of green shoots. The segment is expected to recover faster within a time frame of 3 to 6 months. Residential, although the residential segment has shown some sign of recovery in the last 2 to 3 months, the timeline for complete recovery seems close to 12 months as pessimistic consumer sentiments, macroeconomic headwinds still persist. It is to be seen how long the virus will last, or if there will be second wave, how much time will it then require to develop an effective vaccine, and by that time what will be the loss in the economic activity. Retail, I think this segment is impacted the most, and the fear of contracting COVID-19 and the low propensity to spend due to job losses and recession may keep the footfalls low even after the lockdown is lifted. Hence, retail would be the last to recover. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the rating dispersion and migration over the past 5 years. In this slide, FY20 indicates ratings done during FY20 based on FY19 financials. Among the total companies rated, 51% of the ratings are under below investment grade at CARE Ratings, and 49% are under investment grade in FY20, vis-a-vis 64% under the BIG category in FY19. The dispersion shift, as we can see, is in A band, wherein the companies rated rose from 5% in FY19 to about 11% in FY20. The shift was on account of downgrade of certain cases from AA to single A band. And the same is not reflected in that AA because of the change in the total number of companies during the 2 years. In AAA, we only have one company, and that is backed by strong and resourceful promoter group. Majority of the companies that belong to AA and A band category ratings are listed. They represent the organized sector of the industry with established parentage and brand image, having diversified presence in more than 3 to 4 states. Operations are managed by experienced and professional management. They have product diversification like residential, commercial segment, and leased out properties. Financially, they have low leverage ratios of below 1.5 times, long-term commercial lease tie-ups, and good portfolio of projects. Companies in the BBB category are those who have established brand image in their area of presence, real estate being more geographical, experienced promoters in the industry, moving towards the organized sector. In the ongoing projects, they have healthy booking status, satisfactory execution stage, thus lowering the execution risk, and moderate reliance on external debt with leverage ratio of less than 2 times. Next slide, please. Real estate, the year that was, and the COVID impact on ratings. The slide displays a closer look at the rating dispersion and migration for FY20, with 18% rating downgrades in FY20 and only 7% upgrades. Further rating action in about 18% of the real estate sector has happened during the April 2020 to mid-October 2020 due to COVID. The rating action has been majorly on the outlook due to the negative bias towards the industry and long rope to recovery. About 6% of the ratings have been downgraded. Overall, we can see that the companies which are already struggling in the subdued market to grow got further impacted due to the pandemic, and the ratings for those were revised downwards, whereas the companies having good debt protection matrices and however impacted due to lockdown were assigned negative outlooks, largely companies in the residential and the retail space. Modified credit ratio. The ratio is defined as ratio of upgrade plus reaffirmation divided by downgrades plus reaffirmation. Unity ratio represents same quantum of upgrades and downgrades. Below unity represents more of downgrades than upgrades, and above unity ratio represents more of upgrades than downgrades. In the given chart, we can see that during Q2 FY19, there were relatively more upgrades as compared to Q2 FY20, wherein the ratio stood at 0.91, and during Q2 FY21, taking into account the pandemic impact, the ratio has been lower at 0.86. Next slide. I will touch upon the key rating concerns that we have experienced in the rating process. The industry is fragmented and dominated by unorganized players due to low entry barrier. Small size developers with lack of experience cover major part of the sector. Further challenges are faced by them from the regulatory aspects such as timely receipt of approvals, compliance with RERA, etc., typically experiencing cost overrun and cash flow mismatches if sales momentum slows down. Further occurrence of pandemic has brought in altogether a new set of concerns such as disrupted construction activities, supply chain issues, pessimistic consumer sentiments, and weakening of financial profile of the consumers, resulting into dip in collections, which has deteriorated the liquidity of the already cash-starved sector. However, as the nation is progressively opening up after the lockdown, the real estate markets have also started to recover, and some reports suggest that India's residential real estate market is on the path to a decisive return of serious home buyer inquiries, which are at 50% of the pre-COVID levels in top cities. To keep the market economics in play in the pandemic hit industry, developers are also offering offers such as deferred payment plans, assured rentals, free clubhouse memberships, no stamp duty, to name a few. Next slide. I'll touch upon the outlook of the sector. So after the 4 spells of stringent nationwide lockdown, India has taken steps to unlock major sections of the economy, including the real estate and the construction sector. However, social distancing and hygiene norms will still have to be followed religiously. Residential segment to witness traction in tier 2, tier 3 cities, though our outlook still remains negative. Affordable housing would be the focus area of the developers or mid-income housing, supported by various government initiatives to promote the segment. Macroeconomic improvement will drive commercial transactions, office transactions. Developers to focus on fewer launches, completion of projects will have to leverage the technology to differentiate their offerings in order to attract customers in the post-COVID era. COVID-19 has accelerated the already existing consolidation in the real estate sector. Leasing of office space is stable. Warehousing also remains stable, as we have discussed earlier. However, the retail sector outlook remains negative. With this, I end our presentation. Thank you everyone for the patient listening. I would now request Mr. Rohit Gira to give the developer's perspective on the sector.
Thank you very much for having me on this session to talk about the developer's perspective on the real estate sector. So, I think real estate historically has been a highly forgiving business, right? Wrongdoings by developers didn't lead to repercussions for the future. And I'm going to take 4 aspects of the real estate business and just explain what I mean by that. Let's take customers, right? So, delays in projects, bad quality, problems with title, wrong product, all these were the norm, right? Anything sells was quite the norm, right? You build it, they'll come, herd mentality. One developer did something successfully, everybody followed. This is what was happening on the product and on the customer side. On the banking side, refinancing of loans, evergreening, we saw evergreening happening, due diligence. I've even heard of cases where at the housing finance institutions, the kind of certification provided by architects has been completely wrong, right? So architects giving stamped certificates and documents of things which are not actually been sanctioned, right? And yet there was no long-term repercussion or impact to these developers. Approvals, purely in the state of the approvals, we would start without having the OC, build a little bit extra. The Mumbai, the flower beds in Mumbai are famous for being enclosed over the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, right? Violations in the environment norms were acceptable. All this was a few years ago. Now, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, the real estate sector has received tremendous body blows, right? And what's above the line, what we talk about is demonetization, RERA, GST, the impact of the ILFS debacle, and now the latest one being COVID. But what's below the radar, if you will, is the unstated portion, customer aggression, where customers are saying enough is enough. Judicial intervention, where the judiciary is saying enough is enough. And RERA was the government's way of saying enough is enough. So as a result of all of these, body blows to the sector, we are today functioning in in probably what is the most unforgiving environment that we've ever been in. So developers today, it's a completely perform or perish kind of situation, right? Customers are protected today with RERA, a voice on social media. You delay and you have to pay penalties. The cowboy NBFCs that funded developers indiscriminately, all are now subdued. So evergreening of loans is no longer permitted. Therefore, capitalization of developers, funding assumes that much more, that much more importance. Look, even the RBI, if you look at the recent support and the relief measures that the RBI is offering, for real estate, they're very clear. You had to be a standard account on the 1st of March. Otherwise, you're not eligible for any sort of COVID level relief. Historically, you would have said, chalo, theek hai, you're giving somebody an opportunity, give everybody an opportunity. Illegal construction without approvals, no longer possible, because customers today are that vigilant. There's transparency of the plans because of RERA. When it comes to the environment, developers have been fined hundreds of crores for violation of environment laws. So, everything put together tells you that this is we are no longer in a situation where we can do as we please, and we are in a highly, highly unforgiving business, right? We can't anymore go ahead and do a project which you say you don't know what the product will sell, because look, RERA now stops you from even making changes in the plans. So all of this has really transformed the industry to becoming to the need to become far more data driven, far more research oriented, far more professionally run. So I think this is a really good thing as far as the sector is concerned. I want to take a couple of minutes and just talk about one of the other things which concerns me personally as far as the sector is concerned. So RERA addressed one point, which was when customers, when developers are due to receive money, one of the problems that developers were indulging in was taking that money and deploying it elsewhere, right? So we were siphoning off the money. So RERA, so the authorities said we need to stop this, and they came up with this escrow mechanism where 70% has to go into the project, 30% can be taken out. This was predicated on one fact, right? And that is that sales will take place. But in today's environment, when sales are difficult, when consumers are only going to buy from reputed developers where they have the right product at the right price in the right location, the risk to projects of not making adequate sales is extremely high. And there is no mechanism in place today in this country for ensuring real estate projects have financial closure before they start and launch the project. And I think this is a serious cause for concern, because my fear is that going forward, we'll see a number of projects launched by people who are not well capitalized, who do not have the sales falling into place, and you'll have customers in those projects getting stuck without the projects being completed. So rather than just talk about a problem, I'd like to take another minute and talk about what I think could be a really simple solution, right? A project which does not have a risk of being left incomplete because of a lack of funding provides lower risk to the mortgage companies. So why can't the financial institutions do an assessment and say, okay, such and such project by this developer has achieved financial closure, and we'll charge, I don't know, 20-25 basis points less on the interest rate to the customers who are borrowing for these projects. Immediately you will find a large number of customers gravitating to projects which have got financial closure, right? Simultaneously, you'll find developers coming and realizing that if they want to make the sales, they need to get financial closure for their projects. And this will shift us as an industry towards having financial closure on our projects. You look at projects in the US, you cannot sell an apartment until you have OC, right? I mean, if the government, if we had this problem where despite RERA, if people were, projects get stuck, God forbid, if the government decides to say, okay, you can only follow the US model, right? The sector, as we know, will completely come, will get completely shattered. So I think it's time that, as the rating agency, as the financial institutions, and as developers, who are largely responsible for the long-term success of the industry, I think this is something whose time has come, and that we should all together now start looking at saying, okay, how do we reward those projects which have greater or have complete financial closure? So I'm going to stop with that. I was asked to speak for about 10 minutes. I think I've taken about 10. I'm happy to answer any questions or, whatever your panelists decide to have me do. So thank you very much for the time to express my thoughts.
Thank you, sir. It's always refreshing to hear you, because you bring in something very new to the whole discussion. Today also you have brought in new points which are quite important, and unconsciously we are aware about that, but then you have put it quite effectively. From CARE's side, we have a few questions for you. First question being that the recent improvement in sales, which is we are seeing, that is appearing in which cities and which kind of ticket sizes, and how sustainable is that? What is your take on that?
So as we emerge from the lockdown, right? I think one of the things, the way we like to look at it is there is a tremendous need for housing in this country, right? When need translates to demand is when developers are able to fulfill that demand. Otherwise, it stays in the need stage. Now, what COVID did is it brought about so much uncertainty around jobs and salaries that all the demand migrated back into the need segment. Today, as we see consumers, today as we see companies are coming to terms with it, some companies are even offering, are announcing increments for their teams, right? As we start seeing the confidence return amongst the employers, so the confidence returns to the employees, and that need translates back into demand. Even before the COVID impact, I think the luxury segment was severely impacted. I think that continues. The 60 lakh to 90 lakh, 1 crore, that sort of price point is doing and continues to do well. The 32 or the 40 to 60 lakh as well is a positive sector, but some of the challenges with that segment is the commute distances. If you want to go down to 40 lakhs and you're talking about maybe 4,000 rupees a square foot with stamp duty, GST and all of that, you need to travel a long distance. So I think that at the very low price points, commute is and public transport becomes an issue. But otherwise, I think 50 lakhs to 1 crore is the sweet spot. Our new projects that we're looking at are also in this sweet spot. We did something recently where we sold 1,000 apartments in about 4 or 6 months, and this was in that similar price point of 50 lakhs to 1 crore of rupees. So I think that's like largely the segment across the country which is seeing a demand. How sustainable is it, which was the other question? I think we have a tremendous need for housing in the country, and what I think is certainly happening is that consumers are becoming discerning, and as a result, this is going to be highly sustainable for the reputed developers who are able to deliver the right product on time to the requisite quality. Those who are not able to do this, please write them off, and write them off permanently.
And on the leasing of office space, how exactly you see the scenario unfolding?
So again, I think there was a lot of talk about how work from home will impact residential, how work from home will impact offices. We are seeing, we've seen rentals take place even through COVID for our for the Gera Commerce Zone, IT Park and IT SEZ in Kharadi and Pune. We've seen that happen. On the work from home piece, I think there is a tremendous fatigue settling in, and some people believe that they are living at work. And I think that this concept of work from home was something that works on a short-term basis, but there are tremendous downsides and risks of permanently working from home. I saw one of your slides which said tier 2, tier 3 cities will see greater demand. Personally, I don't see that it translating to that. So I think it's the other factors and not COVID that's going to determine office leasing. We continue to believe that the office leasing space continues to see a bounce back, and we will continue to see positive numbers here. The one thing though is, as a result of COVID, a lot of people shelved their plans for large office parks because the kind of capital that this requires is substantial. As a result, I think we will actually see a lack of, a shortage of supply in the next 3 years from now because of people curtailing new launches.
Yeah, Divesh, here I had one question for you. So we have been seeing consolidation in the sector since RERA has launched, and so given that perspective, and the projects have stalled quite a few. So how do you see the funding and any support from the government and the lending institutions?
So the government came in with the fund but they said that the project has to be net worth positive or net cash flow positive, right? Which is understandable. You only want to fund a project where there's going to be money that can be repaid. Nobody wants to just give a grant. Those projects, I think, at least have a slight hope of seeing light at the end of the day. The projects which are truly troubled are those where the developers have taken out the money and the project doesn't have the necessary free cash flow, even if it gets completed, to support the cost of completing the project. I don't see the government stepping in and paying for the consumers on this count. Okay. Certainly, I think the government can prosecute those developers, but that doesn't mean the project gets completed. I don't see banks stepping in and putting their own money. It's obviously the project is stuck, so the developer has no money. So the only way these projects can get completed is if the consumers who have bought in that project themselves come along and say, okay, I was to pay 5,000 rupees a square foot. I have paid, in the worst case, let's say I've paid 4,500. I've paid 90%. Okay. And there's still 1,000 rupees that need to be spent to complete the project. I will contribute my money. At least the home has cost me not 5,000 by 5,500, but I'm not losing 4,500. So I think it's time now for this set of projects which are currently stuck, where there is no, which are net worth negative, let's say. I think those only get solved by consumers coming in and solving their problem themselves. I know, nobody talks about this because it isn't politically correct to ask the poor customers who've already spent so much money to have to pay more. But who else will come and help them unless they help themselves?
Right.
Now, like I said, not a politically correct answer, but I think that's the you have to help yourself.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Unfortunately, but yeah.
A lot of it gets entangled with NCLT and all those issues, financial, creditor, operational, and the home buyer. So that entire thing is quite riskier for the end consumer who's spending his life.
No, it is such a sad situation. People have put their life's earnings in. They're paying rent. The bank is asking them to pay their pre-EMIs. It's disgraceful what has happened to these poor people. But if somebody is to come and bail them out, the first thing they have to look at doing is help themselves. Then I think the banks will certainly come, support them, top up the loan. All the other things will fall into place. Sorry, go ahead. I think you were saying something else.
Yeah. So there are a few questions from the guests. So I think I'll ask those questions. So one question is from Rishi Kala. He's from Financial Express, New Delhi, and the question is to you that how do you see the demand from NRIs, and can that bring in demand in the luxury segment?
So we have seen that there has been a demand, a push on demand from the NRIs. Personally, in our own organization, we've seen that happen. Will it come back into the luxury segment again? There was so much oversupply in that space. And look, one thing to keep in mind is that the luxury consumer, for the most part, already lives in his own home. For the most part, right? So you're talking about an upgrade. Okay. When will you upgrade? You'll upgrade when you're doing well in your business, and you'll upgrade when you're doing well otherwise, right? And when you say, my other investments are doing well, it's now time to upgrade myself. Okay. People and a large segment of those who are in the luxury segment are entrepreneurs themselves. The senior level professionals forms one part. It's also entrepreneurs. Today, as a result of COVID, entrepreneurs are the worst hit. Small, medium enterprises are the worst hit. So my own view is I don't see them, especially if they're already living in a home of their own, for them to upgrade to a new luxury property. I think it'll be some time before that happens. I think we need to see GDP numbers rise. I think we need to see prosperity return to entrepreneurs, and that's when the luxury segment will truly take off. In the meanwhile, you'll certainly read about stories like appear from time to time. Somebody paid 50 crores for an apartment in Mumbai. Somebody paid 80 crores for an apartment in Mumbai. Those are very few people, but that does not, that like they say, one swallow doesn't make a summer. It's just that. I think it's a little bit of time before the luxury segment really truly takes off.
Okay. Another question is from Sumit Kumar, and again he says that the recovery in residential demand. Do you see this beyond the window of stamp duty reduction in Maharashtra and festive season? The sustainability.
So I think, like I said earlier, the need translates back to demand. Sometimes there is a trigger. I have to compliment the government of Maharashtra for this scheme, and I'll tell you the part which I'm truly amazed at is they said that it's 3% reduction in the stamp duty till December, and thereafter is 2%. Right now, what that does is it provides you with a staggering impact. And it says, okay, those who are able to buy the home by December will get a better benefit. So suddenly you're pushing people, right? It's not like a guillotine kind of, okay, it's available till 31st December and then it's not. That has certainly spurred a lot of sales. As a result of that, I think what we will see is a lot of the good developers will end up with some pretty good sales happening. I think the recovery really depends on on how intelligent the consumer is, and here's what I mean by that. We will see sales. We will see reputed developers who are doing good quality work have less inventory available for sale. We are currently facing a crisis ourselves of less inventory available because of our sales, right? So we are now scrambling to get new projects launched. In this situation, if consumers decide to go to fly-by-night operators and buy, okay, we'll see a problem. If they wait it out and buy with reputed developers, I think there is a sustained recovery for those reputed developers, and certainly of the ones in your BBB category and upward, who I think will see far more beneficial outcome of this recovery right now.
I think we'll take the last question. It's from Mahendra Patil. In this pandemic, we have been hearing about the digital mode to sell homes. How effective is this?
Oh, great question. So we find that people are, because they don't want to drive around and look around, they're doing a lot of their pre-scouting work online. So they're spending more time on the internet. They're looking at social media. They're reading up about the project. They're doing virtual walkthroughs, and eventually, from previously when they, rather than look at, let's say, going and actually doing site visits for 6 projects, today they're shortlisting down to 2. All that's through social media, and then they go and visit 2 projects. So I don't think digital sales are replacing physical visits. And anybody who's doing this, please, for God's sake, don't do it. Please go visit that project. Please go see that there's concrete being poured. Please go 2 or 3 times and make sure that there are construction workers at that site. So I don't believe that digital should replace. I don't believe it could, and I don't believe it should replace the physical site visit. You never know what you see around unless you go and see it yourself. On a website and on a walkthrough, the developer is not going to show you that. You need to see it yourself, right? So you have to do your site visits, but it certainly augments the entire process of the home buying.
And I think this is from our side, Mridul.
Yeah, thank you, Devesh. Thank you to our guest speaker, Mr. Rohit Gera, for your views and interesting insights. Thank you, Milind sir, Monica, Devesh. And thanks again to all the participants for taking your time out and being a part of this CARE Ratings webinar. We hope the discussion was insightful and look forward to your participation in future also. For any further queries, feedback or suggestion, you are please welcome to write us in the feedback mail, which will be coming no sooner the webinar ends. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.